Hello everybody, welcome to this channel where I talk about my journey in healing chronic fatigue and other chronic symptoms and illnesses that I have found were related to attachment trauma. And so my journey healing attachment trauma, what that looks like for me, and sharing any wisdom that I've gained along the way that I think is helpful for you to try to cut down the internal suffering and the confusion that comes along for many of us in this journey. My name is Lauren. If you're new to me, welcome. If you have been here before, welcome back. I'm so happy to be with you today. Today, I'm making a little bit of a continuation of the last video that I made, which was about disgust. Today, I'm talking about anger and disgust. We're going to explore that some more because there's a lot more to talk about than what I discussed in that 20-minute video. A lot more. So I'm working a lot currently in my own journey with disgust and anger, and I have been for a long time, especially anger. It's been a very long journey and slow journey for me because, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but I was a person who anger was real anger was completely suppressed. And by that I mean the ability to turn bad things into fuel and use anger to do that, and also be able to speak my anger in any kind of a grounded, justified way that was true to my soul. Obviously, in my life, I had experienced irritability and frustration, and actually I had a lot of that, but there was always guilt, there was always shame, and so it would be sort of trying to cram it down, this unconscious process and fight energy that was you're not supposed to be feeling that, but I feel it, but I'm not supposed to be feeling it, but I feel it, but I'm not supposed to be feeling it. What happened when I started to get ill, the way I've conceptualized it now is that as my body became more and more dysfunctional, more and more mitochondria were going offline, going into a cell defense mode instead of an energy production mode, I was losing energy for my defenses in a lot of ways, my ability to suppress emotion, my ability to suppress the things that had been kept down. Now that sounds like a good thing, except when you don't know what's happening, it was horrible. It was horrible because all of this rage started coming up in my body and I had no idea what was happening. I literally thought, I can't tell you, I probably spoke these words 100, 200 times. I'm turning into a monster. I feel like I am turning into a monster. In my early life, developed a belief that if you're sweet, you cannot also be angry. You cannot show your anger. You cannot express anger. That's not allowed. That's not allowed. It hurts people. It creates unsafety. It creates dynamics that are really bad and makes everything so much worse. So just keep it down. And sweetness and anger do not mix. So because I'm a sweet person and I'm a kind person and I'm an empathic person, I'm not allowed to be angry. Anger doesn't go with that. That was the unconscious thing that was going on in my body. And those words don't even encompass it, because when we're talking about these beliefs that have been in our energetic system, a lot of times it feels not quite satisfying to speak it out because it doesn't encompass the whole energy of it. And yet there's also something very important and cathartic about speaking it and working at getting as close as we can to the words that resonate with that feeling. But that's basically the gist, that I was not allowed. There was deep, 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 deep shame and disgust about my anger. Now, that's how I have conceptualized it for a long time. But what actually was happening that I'm seeing now is that disgust was underneath the anger. So the anger was coming out because there was disgust underneath. But there was disgust around everything that is healthy in a solar plexus energy. Drive, ambition, being big, being loud, being proud. You could argue it being seen is sort of the solar plexus because you're taking your energy and you're driving it forward. You're putting it out there and you're speaking your mind. Solar plexus is almost this center point of that draws everything up and out. And when there are blocks there, a lot of other chakras show the symptom. One of the big ones for me was my voice. Speaking was so anxiety producing, which is kind of why doing a YouTube channel is very healing for me because any time of speaking and channeling my passion through my voice was so threatening to me. What I've realized more recently is that deeper than the anger, intertwined with that anger, is disgust. Disgust towards particularly boundaries, setting boundaries, speaking my mind, speaking my needs. That's a whole other iceberg in itself, because I couldn't even identify my needs. It has taken me years to be able to identify, and I'm still working on this, is what are my needs? What are my wants? What are my desires? Where is the access to that? Because there has been so much shame around it. Now I have much better access now, but it's still always developing. It's always deepening, because that has been a very suppressed part of me. Any kind of sticking my neck out was highly threatening, even in these minutia moments in life, because of what I learned in childhood, which was the attachments are going to feel threatened. And that is worse for me than suppressing myself. This is what I learned and how I interpreted it. It is better for me to self-suppress, and this is how a lot of us, especially internalizers and highly sensitive people, empaths, we tend to, when we experience these kinds of attachment issues that are laced with these kinds of more complicated dynamics that are hard to pinpoint, but are there and are very loud, and that teach us these very fundamental things about our authenticity and how much that's able to be shown. If we find that showing anger, showing passion, being big and loud and silly and crazy or whatever it is that's blocked, when we show that vulnerable, authentic, more creative side, that somehow we are put down. We feel shamed, disappointed. We might get anger at us. We might get coldness. We might get just disapproval. We might get judged. These things can have profound impacts, especially on highly sensitive children. And if you have chronic fatigue or chronic illnesses, it could be that you were a highly sensitive child. You are a highly sensitive person. And that sensitivity was not nurtured. It could be these very subtle ways. It could be very overt ways. It doesn't really matter. And that's why I don't like to give very specific examples, because it can happen in so many different ways. But there are patterns. It's however it showed up, you get the message that being big, that solar plexus energy, solar plexus is yellow. Think of the sun. Think of the sun shining bright. Think of the sun in your astrological chart if you're into astrology. The sun, the way we shine brightly, if that was dimmed for any reason, that you felt like you had to dim it, then the solar plexus energies that have to do with anger and disgust are going to be really prominent for you and prevalent. And I have found those of us who are empaths, who had attachment trauma, who now have chronic fatigue or other fatigue illnesses like adrenal fatigue, anger is a big one. There's fear around anger. Grief and anger are the two big energies. I mean, that's true of any trauma, but those are really the big energies for those of us with chronic fatigue. It's a combination of having all this unprocessed grief and deep grief that is this accumulation of disappointment. And then there's this suppression of anger in terms of productive anger, of assertiveness, passion, and direction, because a lot of times it's because the grief is weighing it down. So it feels like a bit of a ball to untangle, but it can be, and your body will lead the way. So what ended up happening, and I'm sharing this in case it's helpful for you, what ended up happening was that the self-suppression over decades of my life created a lot of rage. Self-suppression creates rage. I always think of, when I think of rage, I think of the line, the rage of self-suppression, because that is the source. And what was being suppressed? Well, that's something to explore. One of the things is your bigness. It could be your bigness. It could be your brightness. It could be your big light, whatever way that your light is meant to be seen and wants to be seen. So rage, all rage is the same. It has incredible power coming out of your body. It needs to come out. It's like a pressure cooker that is just it has got to come out. It is dying to come out. And when it doesn't, it creates illness. It creates physical symptoms. I have linked a bunch of my symptoms directly to rage, unprocessed rage, but same with all the emotions, but specifically rage, because rage has it has such primal power, just like terror. They're very similar in how much primal power they have, and they both come out in screams. Rage happens when you've been suppressing, like your whole life. There is a pit of rage in there, and that's normal. It's actually healthy. It's an attempt at a healthy response, because there is a deep, deep part of you that knows you deserve to be seen. There's a deep, deep part of you that knows you deserve to shine your light, that your light is worth seeing. But it's conflicted by those messages that we get in childhood of that your dimmed version is good to see, not your big, bright version, not your high watt version. That's just a little too much. And we get those feedbacks when our parents are like, you can sense, people who are really sensitive can sense these subtle shifts of, parents just kind of felt uncomfortable by like all the noise or the loudness. And it's not their fault. There's something that it was probably triggering in them from their past, a reason that they were very sensitive to those kinds of things. Or they're highly sensitive people themselves, and it's activating some sensitivity that it's not alchemizing. That's what we're trying to learn in this journey of healing, is how to alchemize these energies that we couldn't do by ourselves in childhood, because children cannot process and alchemize emotions by themselves. They have to be in the presence of a compassionate, witnessing other. I differentiate between anger and rage. Anger I think of as the clean expression of needs, wants, desires, passions, boundaries, things that are solar plexus related. It's like a butter knife going through butter. I don't know if that's a good metaphor or not, so forgive me if it's bad. But I'm just thinking of it because it is like a knife, but we don't want it to be super sharp. We want it to be sharp enough that it gets the boundary made. It makes the slice. It creates a path for us. And it also keeps out unsafe people, energies, environments, everything else. But we don't want to have to make it like a sharp knife that will cut somebody. We don't want to cut people. We just want to create our path and our boundaries. So maybe it's an okay metaphor. But what happens is if we feel like we're not allowed to do that, because that's the message that we got, that anger gets pushed down, and then it turns into like 1,000 knives that has this explosive, see, I'm losing my metaphor because it's something like explosive. It's turning into fireworks. It's turning into a volcano because it's so many needs, so many boundaries have not been spoken about because we believed somewhere in our unconscious we're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to speak up. I keep saying not allowed, but that can take different forms. Another form or verbiage that might resonate more is, what's the point? What's the point of doing that? What's the point of saying anything? People won't respect it. People just do it anyway. Then you add disappointment on top of it, and disgust, and more anger on top of it all. So what's the point? Because people aren't going to respect it. So that's another thing that we can learn from childhood too. So when I say it's not allowed, it can have different variations of that, but you could play with what's my version of that. And that's really important to do, actually. It's like, what is my version? What's my belief around that, around anger? Another one is, it's dangerous. If you grew up with a violent parent or like a very hot-headed parent that would come back at you with scary anger because they're so much bigger than you, or they hit you, or they shame you, or they punish you, or they put you in like an isolated room for hours on end. They do something that is really extreme, and that is highly threatening to our sense of safety. Then the belief could be, that's not safe. That is not safe. It could also be, anger takes love away. So just kind of play with the verbiage of what is the phrasing that hits and resonates the most with it. But when we're not allowed, again, it gets suppressed into rage, and rage is like fireworks, and rage is the energy that can create symptoms because there's so much power in it, and it's being like all squished down, it's trying to be contained when there's so much power trying to be released. Now this is really exciting to realize, actually, because one of the most like energizing emotions that we have is anger. That's one of its purposes. It pushes us to move, to take action. It gives us energy to drive. Well, that is the antithesis of chronic fatigue, isn't it? We don't have access to that. And that's one reason it makes a lot of sense that chronic fatigue, a part of it, a sort of an energetic signature of it a lot of times is deeply suppressed or repressed anger. The anger's not moving, the anger's not coming up. So I'll just share how this has looked for me, and it can look different ways. There's no particular order in which these different energies come up. The key is always to listen to the body. The body will drive. The body drives. The body will show what is wanting and ready to come up at any given time. So just listen to the body. So for some people, anger starts coming up, grief comes later. Other people, grief comes up first, anger comes later. That's a simplistic description because it's just sort of cyclical and waves. It comes and goes in waves. It's whatever's coming up in the moment is what we want to look at and unpack, which is why having a coach is really helpful. But for me, my relationship with anger really started with rage because the rage literally started bursting out of me. I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And this was actually like at my sickest with adrenal fatigue, or right before the sickest, as I was in a downward spiral. My body felt like it was literally dying. I was in a gigantic ego death now, I realize. I didn't realize that then. Because when it's physical symptoms, it's not obvious that that's an ego death. It's very not obvious. I could go on another tangent about that. I'm going to try to stay focused. So what happened was this rage started to come up, and it was a couple of years that I spent working with rage. I was in some toxic dynamics that helped bring the rage up. That actually proved to be a very helpful teacher and sort of executioner for these trapped energies. And so my rage started coming up and I didn't know what to do with it. Like I said, I thought I was turning into a monster. I had no idea what was happening. This was before I started working on trauma, had no idea. I just had severe adrenal fatigue and now I was exploding with rage. But I wasn't really letting it explode, of course, because I have people around me. So I would just be like trying to contain it with all my might. And then I would shut myself in a dark room and have sensory deprivation and try to calm down. Eventually I learned havening techniques to help me with anger because it was like an explosion. I'm telling you, it was like a level that I just had no idea what to do with it. Well, over time, as I started learning about trauma, as I started healing my nervous system really came first. If you have adrenal fatigue in particular, I have a link down below to a course on resetting your nervous system specifically made for people with adrenal fatigue. So the nervous system work has to happen first, and then I started learning about trauma, and I started learning about emotions that I had never allowed myself to have before. Emotions and expressing emotions. So I started to learn how to scream. I started doing it in my car. If you've ever had one of these, it's so overwhelming. It starts to come up and it feels like it's uncontrollable. It felt uncontrollable. The reason it felt uncontrollable because I was invalidating the crap out of it. I was shaming it. I was saying, get down now. I hate you. Get out of me. I don't want you. I don't want to look at you. I don't want to see you. Get the frick away from me. And so that made it worse. That made it want to come out more. It's your life force. That's what is really happening. You are channeling your life force. Your life force is like, hell no, I'm not going to stay in here forever. You will see me. So the trick, if something feels uncontrollable, if there you have rage that feels uncontrollable, one of the ways to calm it down is to validate it. To recognize it, to identify, I am enraged and I'm allowed to be enraged and it has really good purpose and it has something that has to be seen. There is something in this that must be seen, that it's requiring that I see. And the only way that I can see it is to allow it to come through me. That will calm it down. Now, it will still feel very intense. And it might not solve it instantaneously, but if you can validate it and you can actually embody that feeling of validation, that you're actually embodying the things that you're saying, that you actually are allowed, it will soften it. But it's still in there. It still needs to come out. So then if you can get yourself to a place and find a private place to release this rage. So I chose the car. There was a road nearby that I would go on that had just very few cars, or I could see them coming and I would stop screaming when they passed. And when there were houses right there, I would stop screaming so I didn't scare people, or like people walking. So I would drive back and forth around or make a loop and just keep driving and screaming. Now, the first time I did this, I like scarred myself because that sound of my voice was horrifying to me. It rang in my ears. I had to work with the shame for weeks after that. And that's okay. That's okay, because that was part of the healing process. There was shame connected to anger, shame connected to rage. So exuding that rage one time with that scream, and it's loud and it is primal and it vibrates your whole body when you scream a scream of rage. So I worked with the shame for a few weeks after that, or actually I don't remember the time frame. It may have been longer than that, and I couldn't do that again for a while. I really had to work with the shame for a long time. And then eventually I started feeling comfortable with the idea again. Not again, I wasn't really comfortable with it the first time in hindsight, but I knew I wanted to get this out of me. It was more of like, get out of me. It was still very judgmental, and it was still, I hate you energy. I hate you and I want you gone. So then I went out again. This time it was less shame. And so I kept doing this until I started to really have fondness for my rage. Because what happens is when you do any kind of emotional release, when you're doing it, a lot of times you will get clarity, you will get downloads, you will get the truth. The truth will come up and out of you, or down, or like get a download of what is speaking, what is it saying. So sometimes we use our cognition to go in and find the wound, and then that'll give us access to the emotion. Other times the emotion will give us access to what's coming up, give us access to the belief, to the wound, to the what is crying out right now, what is screaming out right now. And so what happened was I kept getting downloads, but they would just be like snippets, and I wouldn't know what it meant. Like I would have the urge to scream, get away from me. Get the F away from me, over and over and over and over and over again. That happened for a period of time, and it still happens occasionally. I'm starting to learn what the connections to that are. But the thing is, you don't have to know, but that's clarity. Just knowing that there has been feelings of being like violated, basically. My boundaries have been violated, my personal space, my body, my emotions, my needs, my wants, whatever is being violated, there was something that I have felt, my body has felt deeply violated. And that's the other thing. A lot of times experiencing the emotions is what is needing to be seen. Until you experience the emotion, it can't all be seen. That's where sometimes there's a limitation with talk therapy alone, because there are wounds in our body that we can talk and talk and talk and talk and do these different cognitive approaches, and we never get all the clarity, and so the symptom persists. The thing persists. The emotional wound like never quite resolves because there's information in the physicality. There's information in the experiencing of it that you can't get purely from the cognitive part. Now that's true, that the other way is true too, because it's also really important to be able to link the cognitive parts. And then there's this other piece. A lot of times we have to experience it for a certain length of time to get all the information. That can be a frustrating or confusing point, because if we don't understand that, then it feels like, well, I'm releasing all this stuff and I don't feel any different. Like it's not moving the symptom. So then what am I doing wrong? I must be doing something wrong if it's not moving, right? No, you're not actually. I mean, you can personally sort of investigate, is there shame here? Is there judgment here? Or is my nervous system haywire after I have a release like this and I can't calm it down? The nervous system and shame and judgment are the things that can make a wound feel infinite, that it just like won't move no matter how many times we come back around. So you can kind of self-analyze, is there, and just kind of keep questioning, is there any of that? But if there isn't any of that, or if it's minor, or if you feel like you've got a good handle on that, the other piece to understand is that there's information in the volume. And I don't mean like volume loudness, although there is information in that, there is. But what I'm saying right now is there is information in like the amount that is in there. The experience of exuding these energies again and again and again and feeling the depth of them, feeling the intensity of them. And this is true for symptoms. Symptoms, feeling it over and every day, daily, 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 daily. And when we know that this symptom is a reenactment of an experience that we had in childhood, there is so much information in the fact that you're having to repeat it over and over and over again because it's showing you just how much is in there. We have to have that for it to feel fully seen because these are emotional memories. These are not explicit memories. They're emotional memories. And with emotional memories, we have to experience them again. We experienced them in the traumatic state when there was no one there to help us and we were alone to process these energies. Now we're in the post-traumatic period where now we have the opportunity to be there with it and process it. A lot of times that means experience it and turn towards it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Another way to think about this is it's trust building. And trust is only built over time and experience. Anyone knows if someone betrays you and you're in a trust building thing in that relationship, only time and experience and seeing that person be consistent over and over and over and over and over again over time is the only way to build trust again. At least as far as I know. It's the same with our inner child. That trust, there was trust broken again and again and again in childhood with our attachment figures. Now we're in this post-traumatic period of healing where we have to build trust where there wasn't trust. And so that means repeating and experiencing these symptoms over and over. It's just like daily, every single day. A lot of times we can feel like, and this was a very hard lesson learned for me. It took me years to learn, years, that it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. When there's stuff coming up, my default wants to say, if I was doing it right, it would go away. If I'm doing it right, then it would release. If I was creating a good enough space and like a nurturing and accepting enough space, then it would be coming up. By coming up, I mean release. But instead, it's coming up as these symptoms. So I'm doing a lot of solar plexus healing for myself right now, and there are symptoms coming up, gut symptoms and skin symptoms that are coming up. And I'm having to remind myself of this now, that it's just about holding the space and being present with it over and over and over again and acknowledging it and putting a truth lens on it over and over and over again. I see this pain. I see that you're in pain. I know that you're angry. I see you're angry. You have every right to be angry. You don't have to know what you're angry about. I know that your anger is justified because it's there. And it wouldn't be there if it wasn't justified. The body never lies. And that's something that you learn over experience, that the body never lies. You learn it over and over again. Eventually, it takes you to an energy of surrender. There's still an urge of, if I'm doing it right, it would be healed. And it's not true. Because there is just this natural process that, like, you could make an argument that it is predestined how long this is going to take. But we don't know. That's what makes it so hard, that we don't know how long it's going to take. And so you're working with these symptoms. They can be mental symptoms, they can be physical symptoms. It's almost like there are a certain number of days we've got to put in this presence energy, validation, validation, validation. I have learned that is one of the biggest things that we didn't get in childhood that creates so many impacts. The validation is what these energies need. The validation over, and not just once, over and over and over again, the repetitive validation of I see you, I feel you, I know you're here for a good reason. And you are welcome here. I'm with you. You're not alone. Even if we don't 100% believe it, it's that intentionality that's the key, and bringing that intentionality over and over again. And leaning into the surrender as much as we can. Because with trauma, we've got a fight energy. There's a natural fight energy. That's what got us through. It's how we survived. It's how we created a sense of safety, is with that fight energy. I got to push through. I got to be better. I got to do better. I got to be better. I got to do better. I got to give more. I got to like give of self all the time. Give all my energy away. I can never be big, never be loud, never step on toes. All these things to create some safety in ourselves. Now we're saying this thing of, you are allowed to be here. You're safe with me. You're welcome here. And I'm with you. You're not alone. I'm not going to abandon you, that intentionality and the surrender as much as we can. So these energies will not leave until they're fully seen. And that includes the cognitive piece. It includes the history. Where did it come from? What did I believe back then? What meaning did I make out of it? What was the source? What was I really experiencing? And then the experiencing of it itself. Underneath all of that is doing the nervous system work to create safety. So how to make these energies feel fully seen is they have to feel safe. They have to feel compassion towards them, release shame, release judgment, and they have to feel embraced. They have to feel turned towards, and they have to feel fully seen. And that fully seen piece is what a lot of times we can end up having a lot of resistance against. Definitely me. I could not even begin to tell you the amount of resistance that I have found. It's just been like a layering process of releasing layer after layer after layer after layer of resistance. That's what learning surrender is about in my experience. It's about continuing to find new layers of resistance and then working with those. So rage. Rage was something that just kept coming up again and again and again for several years. And like I said, these toxic relationship dynamics can help you bring them up, although I wouldn't recommend it. But there are going to be triggers. If you've got rage in your body, something's going to trigger it. Something is going to trigger it, and it's going to be in the right time. That's another thing to keep in mind, is that we can't force rage to come up. We can't force anger to come up. It will come up when it's ready to be seen. Sometimes that means processing a lot of grief first. A lot of times it means working with shame first, with disgust first. It can look a number of different ways. The order doesn't matter, but it can be frustrating when we know anger is a piece. Same with grief. We can know, if we know one of the two of them is a piece of what we're working with and what's causing these physical symptoms, and it's like, well, then it just come up. I just have to let, just come up. We just come up, and if it's not coming up, then I'm doing something wrong. It's not that. It's that your body is having you see something else first before it feels ready to come up, before it's time to do that. One of the biggest lessons on this journey that I have found is to trust your body. Your body knows what it's doing. Your body knows what it's doing. It's so hard to trust it because in childhood we were taught not to trust our bodies, because when we were being invalidated, what that really means is something organic, something authentic was coming up out of us. We wanted to express it, and it was shut down in one way or the other. So we were basically told the stuff that comes up in your body is wrong, is incorrect, deserves to be judged or shamed or dismissed or disapproved of. And so what happens? We learn to not trust our bodies. So then in a chronic illness situation, that's a difficult energy to work with, because then it's like, see, I can't trust my body. See, my body's working against me. But it's not that. It's actually the wound that's causing the illness that's bringing up this belief. Do you see what I mean? It's the wound that's the source. It's not true that your body's actually untrustworthy. What's true is your body's trying to show you this wound by bringing up something that activates the same belief. The body's brilliant. It's brilliant. So trust your body, because it is always trying to show you something, and it's showing you the exact thing that you need at that time. Sometimes that can mean stuff feels stuck and stuck and stuck and stuck and stuck and stuck. What's that trying to show you? The feeling of stuckness. The feeling of stuckness. Could that have been a resonant energy in your childhood? Probably. What's another thing it could be trying to show you? That no matter what I do, nothing works. What if it's trying to show you through experience? It's trying to let you experience powerlessness again. It's showing you the energy of powerlessness again. Was that a prominent energy in your childhood? You can count on it. The answer is yes. You just have to think about, why was that true? Well, that's always going to be true if your parents were not giving you the safe attachment signals, and you are reaching and reaching and trying to be perfect and just good enough and just doing all the right things, and no matter what you did, they wouldn't or couldn't give you those signals that you needed. Powerlessness. Every single day. That's a daily experience. That's a habitual experience. And so what's happening with this illness and the fact that nobody out there can help you? that everybody you go to disappoints you. And it feels like no matter what you do, your body says no. No matter what you do, you're trapped. It's trying to show you the energy of powerlessness and get you to love it. Not just love it, but see the truth. That this isn't the surface level meaning that we tend to make it. It's the past. It's a reenactment of the past. I was talking about rage because it's the same theme. The rage has to be seen as much as it has to be seen. And part of it being seen is the number of times it has to come up. And you'll get downloads of what is being released out of your body. Every time you release emotional energy, something is moving. Even if you can't feel the direct impact after. Something's moving, something's being shown to you, something's being taught. This whole video is really, the whole point is trust your body. Trust your body. The body's going to show you what needs to be seen. And so for me, that experience with rage has led to access to a bunch of grief. It embarked on a period of a lot of rage and then contraction, like hold it in until it was too much, and then it was rage, and then it got lower and lower, and I would notice it sooner and sooner, and then they would still be angry, and it would be more grounded, but it was still coming out too strong. That lasted a long time. So it was like the suppression versus expulsion, the height of it would shrink over time. It's still shrinking. I'm still working on this. It's a relationship that takes time, at least in my experience. The ability to notice in the moment when you're angry or whatever feeling, but I'm particularly talking about angry, when a boundary has been crossed, and then notice and identify what is the feeling that I'm feeling, acknowledge it, validate it, and be able to do that in like a fluid moment when you're around other people. When it used to be for me that when other people around was like so loud, all the emotional content was so loud, I couldn't hear anything that was going on in my authentic being and my emotional state. So now to get to this point of being grounded, of being able to self-validate, being able to recognize, being able to calm, being able to feel worthy enough, secure enough in my sense of self, so that it's not so loud every time I'm in a room with other people, to be able to have enough quiet that I can hear and I can acknowledge and validate what I'm feeling in that moment. And that's a whole process on its own. Then to be able to speak about it and say, that didn't feel good to me. Can we talk about that? Or actually, I don't want to do that thing. Or I actually need to do this because I've learned I need that to take care of myself and I can't do that. The other point is every journey is different, and that's the same point as trust your body, because my journey is not going to look the same as yours. But I'm hoping, like I hope in every video that I make that I talk about my own experience, is that sharing my experience will be helpful to hear some things that I have learned. I personally find it most helpful to hear people's journeys about what they've learned who have struggled massively with these things. Instead of the person that's really good, like naturally good at it and what that looks like, I think a lot of us find more resonance in the person who has struggled deeply and profoundly. This has been one of the hardest energies for me of my entire life to work with, is anger. My relationship with my anger. And it's so complex. There are so many ways that anger is expressed. It's not just being angry. Remember that your body knows what needs to come up next. Even if that, like I said, it could be stuckness. That's a reenactment from childhood. It could be powerlessness. It could be disappointment. It could be despair of where you are in your life right now. It's a reenactment of what was happening then. I really hope this video made sense and you found some gold nuggets in there and it was helpful and supportive. If you are interested in one-on-one support from me, you are welcome to book a one-on-one session with me. You can book that on my website. It's laurenvorhees.com, and that link is down below. You can book a 30-minute free session first before paid sessions. I would love to talk to you and support you on your journey, and I hope your healing journey is going really well and you're feeling grounded and successful and productive. There's no doubt there's a lot coming up for you because that's just the time that we're in. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye.